I am live. Okay, well, no one's expecting me to be here, so I'm just going to ramble a bit until I see someone show up. It should be a good time in a few locations from not Asia probably, but certainly in Europe and the Americas. And is anybody there yet? Nope. Okay. Eventually someone's going to figure out I'm here. I am in Prague, where it seems like an appropriate place to be at this point. I'm going to be discussing Ukraine once I get something like a modicum of folks who are interested. If you're there, let me know and say howdy. Hello, Jay. Glad to have you aboard. And again, I'm going to be discussing Ukraine, but I'll talk more about that when we get a few more people here, since I didn't let anyone know. But I did have a few people on Twitter who were saying, Byrne, can you do a live stream and talk about this? And I am not, hello, Wendell, I am not an expert on geopolitics, but I do know a bit about what's going on. And so we'll do that. Hello, Mr. Alien. And David Flores, howdy to you. Howdy is a fine greeting. I love saying howdy to people in Europe because they don't quite know what it means. Then I explain it. It's short for how do you do? And then they get confused and they go, I'm fine. So it's just like, no, it's like, hi, howdy. But, in Europe, if you say, how do you do, or how are you good? How's it going? What's up? People tend to want to actually answer the question, which is great. But if you're an American, and they get actually confused when they go to America and people go, what's up? How is it going? And the Americans actually don't want to know. They just are saying, hi. So, Doug Benny, good afternoon from Canada. I hope you're keeping your wheels on the road there, if you know what I mean. Yes, Georgia is close to the action. What I'm going to do at a certain point when we get a few more people here is I am just going to start talking. I'm not going to take questions quite yet. I'm just going to start talking about some of my thoughts about Ukraine, and Russia at the moment. And especially since I'm living close to there. But actually, right now, I'm actually in Prague. By the way, have any of you noticed my recent on Georgian Crossroads? I'm doing something called the Prague Diaries, and if you look up diary number 4, which I put yesterday, it's all about a protest that I caught on film. And some thoughts I had about the situation going on in the world. Another person from Canada. Okay, that's nice. It's nice to know you folks are at least allowed to use your computers. And if the lighting is weird here, it's because I've got some sort of orange lighting coming down. I don't have any direct lighting. So I apologize for that. Such is life. Let's see. So we've got, we had more people here. We're down to 2. It's hardly worth, I'm sure you're both wonderful people. But we are going to be doing a discussion about Ukraine if we can get a few more people here. Some people just want to say hello and they don't have time. I understand. Okay. Yeah, got a juggalo thing going on here. So someone I see smoking alien watched my diary number 4. And actually, what I am going to do is I'm going to put a kind of a longer edited version of the Prague Diaries. Once I am finished, I'll put them up in a few parts, so it'll be more of an epic story. So, and oh, greetings from Ohio, Mr. Lutz. Glad to have you. Are there only 3 people watching? It's 4. Okay, it's strange. Well, heck, if I wait forever, people can just catch up. So let's talk about Ukraine. Obviously, something big happened yesterday. And yeah, is it World War III? Not yet, but I wouldn't hedge my bets against it either. I think that there is a very interesting video you should watch by Konstantin Kisin, but it's really on his Triggernometry YouTube channel, and he just dropped it yesterday. And it's basically about what the West just doesn't get about what's going on. And we tend to think, oh, Putin's a madman, and we have all of our stuff, and we're inside of our heads, but we don't understand the Russian heads. And I think it's very important that we learn to understand what's going on in there. It's not like the Russians are evil and we're good. It's nothing so simple. But obviously, what happened yesterday, his perspective was, hello, Mr. Metaphysics. His perspective is that what happened yesterday is more important, certainly, than COVID, and more important than 9/11. And that is because what it's announcing to the world is that all that other stuff that we've been living in a bubble since World War II. And that bubble has largely been an American bubble. And what we call globalization has largely been what I call the cancer America, the shopping malls and the endless junk that we buy, and all this stuff has been largely the cancer version of ourselves. It took over us first, and then it's gone throughout the world. And we have the time to sit and debate what our pronouns are and who we are, and our identities and such, because we don't have any identity, and also we don't understand how serious life gets. So my feeling is that the most important thing we can do right now is to realize what's just ended. And what's just ended, in a way, you could say it started with COVID and then went on to all the protests and riots, and then on to the crazy election in 2020 and the twilight zone of the last year. But what's happened is we have just entered, we are no longer anywhere near the 20th century. All the things that made up the late 20th century, from World War II on to, I'll say 2011, have disappeared. They're gone. They're not coming back. 2019 is never coming back. It's just kind of over. And if you expect that we're going to return to that, you are severely mistaken. And one thing that's very important is that now we're not even back at the beginning of the 20th century. We're in no man's land, because we now have very powerful means of disrupting everything. And I'm not just talking about nuclear weapons. I'm talking about cyber attacks. I'm talking about banking attacks. I'm talking about hardcore propaganda that most people have been feeding off of. And even people who would say, believe something close to me, I often go like, you just dived into the propaganda for our side. So I think what's happened is, now what a lot of people don't understand is that Ukraine and Russia's relationship is it's a very difficult relationship for us to understand, because essentially they are connected as far as countries go, but they are also very different from each other. And the way the Soviet Union split, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but Putin has a point that the eastern edge of Ukraine has an awful lot of Russians who have more of a Russian attitude. And the western part of Ukraine, which is where part of my lineage comes from, is also very, very different. They're the ones who really speak Ukrainian more than Russian. At the same time, most people, whether they speak Russian or Ukrainian, I mean, there are some people who are like really much more Russian in their outlook, but most people were more Ukrainian, even if they only spoke Russian mostly. So I'm saying that what's going on now is a complete refit configuration of where we are. You know, for instance, if Russia and China collude together, we're at a stalemate. We've got the biggest army, military in the world as far as expenditure and weaponry and such, but we're at a stalemate. I'm going back to Georgia after I'm done here in Prague. And I've already been in communication with some people there, and they're saying, why do you want to come here? To which my thought is, I want to come there because that's where I've chosen to live. And the fact that things have gotten uncomfortable I'm not a fair weather friend. The concept of running doesn't appeal to me ever. So, but at the same time, people in Georgia are afraid that the Sauron eye of Putin, whom they really dislike, is going to come back to them. The point is, it already came once in 2008. And a lot of people are saying that 2008, there was a 5-day war in Georgia. Incidentally, they did that 5-day war during the Summer Olympics. Putin is very clever. He waits until people are distracted to do some major move. And we just had another Olympics, which just ended. Meanwhile, COVID, and you've got Canadian truckers. There you go. 2 points for them. You've got all this stuff going on. And Putin knows we're at our weakest. Our president doesn't seem to know where he is. I don't have a lot of faith in his cabinet. I think that it's just a very strange situation we've entered. And if we're lucky, it's going to be like the 5-day war with Georgia back in 2008, where they just basically slapped Georgia really hard and then, created new boundary lines and left. But, and the people in Georgia right now, the government in Georgia where I'm living is saying, we're not joining any big, protest movement against Russia, which has gotten a lot of the population upset because a lot of people really don't like Russia rather. Sorry, they do like their own country. Yeah, come back if you have to leave, come back and listen to the whole thing at some point. So, and I also think this thing has a tendency to drag in more. If we're lucky, it'll end quickly and with a minimal amount of damage, and there'll be new boundary lines. And I think that's what Putin is really interested in. The problem is what's going to be on what side of those lines. And I suspect he's going to want Kiev. Or you might hear some people saying Kiev. That's the Ukrainian pronunciation. Kiev is more the Russian pronunciation. And that's why I've heard someone say, Biden couldn't even pronounce Kiev. He said Kiev. Well, that's because he's trying to be, politically correct as far as being, the Ukrainian pronunciation. But they call it both. But I think that here's the problem. If you back up a bit, for instance, if Putin can get away with this, China will move its piece on the board and take Taiwan. And there isn't much that we can do about that. I mean, we got a huge navy out there, but we can't get any boots on the ground rather quickly. And if we do, what are we going to do? Taiwan isn't that big an island. And both of these things signal really the end of the older America, the America from World War II to the present. I think it was Biden's rather, well, rather sloppy is to put an understatement, withdrawal from Afghanistan, which gave the marker to Putin going back, well, okay, if they're doing that, then we're free to go. So I think that the real problem is next to Ukraine is Poland. Poland is not going to take all of this lying down. Poland and Russia really don't get along. And there's 40 million plus people in Poland. And already they're taking refugees on the border from Ukraine. Not only that, they are taking, Georgia is taking refugees from Ukraine as well and putting them up in hotels. I just found this out today. But these are the countries that, really don't like Russia. But then you start getting to Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. And the fear is that essentially Putin wants to reconstitute the Russian Empire or the Soviet Empire, depending on how you look at it. Yeah, Poland is NATO, but the point is Poland isn't going to let Russia get right up to the border and cross. And keep in mind that the combined forces of China and Russia are pretty tough to beat. And this is why we're on the brink of possibly a massive global conflagration. It doesn't seem to. Well, I was going to say it doesn't. It seem to influence Southern Africa, and then I realized all the things China has been doing over the years to support or bribe countries in the South Saharan Africa. But essentially, this has sent up waves of fear, and here's what I thought about today. And what kind of people are we now? I mean, really, we're people who play video games, and we're people who go on, take selfies in front of the Eiffel Tower, and we're people who, we're narcissistic. So many people complain when they haven't got like some small first world issue solved. In other words, we've become extremely soft and weak. We have an extremely confused president, and we've got an unresolved issue back in the home front. And that is to say that in America, the problem, and America's not the only place. Canada obviously has a growing problem here. The UK, France does. I was just talking to some French people here in Prague. The same problems have started to develop throughout the developed world. And I think that essentially you got people, I mean, I'm here in the Czech Republic. I love the Czech Republic. But I am suddenly looking at these like guys who are like 6'6" walking around. There's a lot of really tall Czechs. And I'm looking at him going, you can just tell he's a geek. He's a gamer. He's like, what good is this person going to be against the Russian army? What person's good is this person going to be? We don't have people in Western Europe and America and the Anglosphere who have a certain kind of strength of character. We're not the same Americans who fought World War II. We're not the same Americans who, have pulled out courage out of our hats. Now, I think there are aspects of us, there have been hopeful signs of people having a dialogue, but I don't think that we are at all ready for anything. And I would hate to see us get into a war at this point because of all this. And I don't know what's going to happen. I have no predictions whatsoever. I am going back to Georgia. I think in my Prague Diary number 4 on the Ukrainian protest, um, there I mentioned that, and maybe some of you know this, but I had a ticket to get from here to Tbilisi that was going uh, through Kiev. I was supposed to do a layover in Kiev, and 3 days ago I canceled that, saying, better not go through Kiev right now. And boy, was I right, because even if they would have canceled my flight no matter what, because they bombed the airports, they bombed the runways. You know, the Russians aren't stupid. They know if you've got a place to land, you can send off fighters. So, this affects me personally. When I go back to Georgia, it's going to be a different world than the one I left. And I think that that's just where we are. And you may remember I've said this before, is that sometimes you just have to recognize, and I did this with COVID, and I did this at different times in my life. You just realize we're not there anymore. We're not going back. It's just like we crossed a boundary. It's like 9/11 was like that. Okay, we've crossed that boundary. We'll never be September 10th again. The 90s were gone. And now we can safely say the first 2 decades of the 21st century are not only over, but they put a big buffer between us and anything that life was like in the 20th century. And I remember a lot of that. I was born in 1955. And all I can say is this world is not that world anymore. And I wouldn't be too cocky about our ability, that our abilities are somehow better than theirs or something like that. And many people are shuffling off the stage who, when I think about political figures who are noteworthy in our times, I don't come up with much of a list. I see Putin. He's noteworthy. Trump is kind of noteworthy. If he has another shot at the president, he might be more noteworthy. But when you look at, we don't have, when you look at the 20th century, from no matter where you were, there were like giants striding the world, whether it was, Hitler or Stalin or Churchill or MacArthur or Patton, or whether it was Fidel Castro or, all these people, Pope John Paul II, of all the important people in the 20th century, I think only Queen Elizabeth is alive, who's seen a great chunk of it. And she is very close to passing on. You have some characters like Bob Dylan was a very important character from the 20th century. Some of those people, but they're all approaching their 80s, like all the classic rock musicians and stuff. And who have we got today? I mean, it's such a strange world by comparison. There aren't leaders. There are simply people, and when you mention the name of a leader, yeah, Macron is the closest thing in Western Europe. Yeah, and yet, did I ever tell you I saw Emmanuel Macron in the flesh? I was actually in the small town Charleville-Mézières, and there were these people outside. I was at this puppetry institute, and there was these people outside protesting, and they were all wearing these yellow vests, the gilets jaunes. And he was there doing some sort of function of state, and he had to get into his limousine and take off. And I saw his hand as he waved. So I did actually see him in the flesh. But anyway, but no, I don't think. Xi is important. Erdogan is important, but even Erdogan is not. He's not on that same level as the kind of people of the 20th century. Xi and Putin, I think you could make a case. But I don't really think any of our presidents have been particularly interesting or good. They've all been divisive, and they've all had big issues. And we just don't, we don't have any leaders. We don't have anybody who seems to have enough character to do something. I do think, however, had Trump been in president now, this probably wouldn't have happened. And the main reason for that is because no one can predict Trump's actions, including Putin. And once you have that, you're kind of like, okay, we're going to wait until he's gone, which is what Putin did. I mean, a lot of people think Putin's crazy. Yeah, as they say in New York City of mafia members, yeah, he's crazy like a fox. In other words, that's the level of crazy. He's actually really, really smart, and he wants to reconstitute the old Russian Empire, of which I'm sitting in Georgia saying, okay, so you coming for me? You coming for us? But like I say, I'm sticking around there because, I'll have to be told I have to leave before I leave there. Okay, what kind of questions do we have? Hi from Ukraine. You're really in Ukraine? Staying strong. Where are you in Ukraine, George? And so let's see. Anyone have any thoughts or questions? I'm not going to go back and read all these. And I'm less interested in kind of statements that seem to be like, I know everything that's going on, because the truth is you don't. And so when people, especially on something like this, if you think you know everything, you don't. And I'm not particularly interested in those kind of statements. But it's easy to want to make them because we're all living in our bubbles that we think interpret the world, and they don't. The world is much bigger. So let's see. Yeah, actually, you're right. Smoking alien. The Putin's speech is almost an hour long. Not the one from the morning where he said basically we're going in, but the one day and a half or so before that. And I would recommend going and listening to that because that'll give you a much more of an idea of what he's actually thinking about. So thanks for pointing that out. Oh, and okay, so here's one of the things, lack of respect. Here's one of the big issues. What part of Ukraine are you in, George? Got a town name or a section, just an area, oblast? Um, Here's one of the big things that Americans don't understand. So the Cold War ends. And we're all like, yay, we won, and now Russia's going to be our friend. And so we send McDonald's to them, and we send all these companies and all these business advisors, and all this money goes over there. And so much stuff gets gobbled up by the oligarchs. And so much stuff that we're doing essentially is just for people to make money. And then what happens is Russia starts to go into a tailspin economically, really, really badly. By about 1997, Russia is really suffering. If you ever spent any time on the internet at that point, there were all sorts of stories about Russian cannibals in Siberia and such, because the value of the ruble had just been totally sunk. And there was part of this whole thing going around in Asia, the devaluation, the wild global stuff going on, which would kind of end with the dot-com bust. And there was a period in time in there. But what did we do as Russia, and we being America and the West, what did we do when Russia was going into this tailspin at the time? And Boris Yeltsin was, essentially a hardcore alcoholic. He really wasn't able to do that much by that time in his life. So what did we do? Nothing. That's what we did. We basically kept crowing about winning the Cold War and, what was happening with Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton. And we didn't do anything. And the Russians, and particularly Putin, who took over from Yeltsin, did not forget that. And that's what I think started the seeds of the newer animosity of Russia and the West, and particularly America. And so that's something to keep in mind, that this is, there is a real sense of, momentum here. We're not out of it's not like we were always the nice guys here. And also Russia would watch our adventures in the Middle East and say, well, if you can do that, why can't we can we get Crimea back? So let's see, what else have we got here? Thanks, La Familia Bazzani, for there's a transcript. That would be a good thing to look for. I just downloaded the speech myself. I often download things that I want to remember. Yeah, thank you. Memories of the 90s are largely mediated through The Simpsons, to which I can only say, whatever. And, seems the rebel regions of the East are very happy. Well, that's the thing, is that the further east you go, you get into territories in Russia which are quite Russified. And I think when they were dividing the country up and in a sense, this is where Putin is right. A large part of what Ukraine was created by the Soviet Union. And they really probably should have moved it a bit further, but right. And Odessa in the south, which was always a big Russian port. So you can see what they're doing. But at the same time, of course, what they're doing is, well, not legal. How about that? And Ukraine has its own issues. They're not exactly a democracy. They basically got a strong man as a leader. And this is, all of these, it's not a black and white issue. It's really complicated. So Charlie Brown, do you have don't let Lucy let you kick the ball. Hello, Byrne, appreciate your commenting. Great. Nathan Liz, V for Vivenge. Okay, I hope you don't mean revenge, because revenge is always wrong. Are Europeans been speaking with hoping for some form of NATO? Yeah, I think. Yeah, the problem of NATO is a complicated one, because when the Cold War ended, one of the things that we signed was that we would not involve a lot of the old Iron Curtain countries and the Soviet countries that split off from Russia to be involved with NATO. Russians have always wanted a buffer zone. But here's the reason why they want a buffer zone. We don't really see it. If you're living in a country with mountains, or if you're living in America, or if you're living in a place that is fairly well protected, what you don't see is Russian history. And there is a plane, a huge plane that starts in northern France, goes through Germany, Poland, into Ukraine, and into Russia, all the way to the Urals. And if you think the Urals are tall, you're wrong. The Urals are like bumps compared to any major mountain chain. We just use them to divide the continent, but they're not really that big. So this is how the Mongolians came through. This is how the Germans went and Napoleon went east, is that this plane. So the Russians have always been freaked out. They've always wanted a buffer zone territory between them and those crazy people in Western Europe, like Napoleon, like Hitler, like, all these other people that they really don't have a lot of respect for. So Poland joins NATO, and the Russians are kind of pissed, but the Poles are saying, whatever, you're not going to change our minds. And then Ukraine wants to join NATO. Now that's a much bigger problem, because you see, they're right on the doorstep. And because this whole thing is confused, Russia essentially sees that as a violation of that buffer zone idea. They want Belarus and Ukraine there so that there's a buffer zone between them. And in a way, there's a problem with, Ukraine's been wanting to join NATO. NATO's been wanting Ukraine to join. And Putin's been sitting there with black squiggles over his head, going and formulating how to prevent that, which is where we are now. Okay, so What else have we got? Yes, there is the well, he didn't say nuclear strike. He said something we've never seen before. And the truth is, this is where I think everyone has a real shortage of imagination. Because what would be worse than a nuclear strike? Total cyber warfare. You know, imagine right now, this all gets shut down and you are no longer able to communicate with the world. And everything connected to the internet goes down where you are. And you can't get news. And you can, because everything is based on technology and the internet. What happens then? Well, that is actually, to my mind, that's actually what we're facing. You know, I don't think the nuclear stuff is so much a reality, but since we've never had a serious cyber war before, I think, and we're much more connected to each other than we ever were before. I mean, back at the whole Y2K scare, everyone thought, oh no, all our computers are going to go down. Had it gone down, it wouldn't have been that serious an issue. We would have taken about 5 years to rebuild a few things and gone on fine. But now the entire world is hooked up. And that includes banking and money. So imagine you can't get any money, you can't communicate with anyone, you don't know what's going on. And you're looking at your little square God in a box, and it does nothing for you. Well, that is it. And imagine your sense of self at that point. Maybe not yours, but imagine the senses of self of so many people who spend their whole day looking down at the little monster. So, recently saw an interview on a German channel with Gorbachev, where he denied that the West ever promised not expanding NATO to the East. Well, it's interesting. I would be interested to see that. I always heard that they had, but or maybe it wasn't quite the way it was interpreted. Seems like everyone's losing faith in leadership since the internet. It's well, that's the problem with the internet is like right now. I have a say some sort of problem with my body. It's amazing how much information I can find online about how to treat myself that doesn't require going into a hospital or a doctor. So one of the things that's happening is we've lost faith in experts by and large because everyone thinks they're an expert. Now, the truth of the matter is what you know is nothing like what a doctor actually knows who goes to school. Nevertheless, you can actually learn a lot. It's just as, you know, you can go online and find a way to fix your car. I've done that. You can go online and find a way to fix your computer. I've done that. You can go online and do all of this stuff. But I don't think that and so leadership is like that. The leaders we have are all basically, they're all basically late 20th century people who don't understand the changes. I mean, and one could argue that Joe Biden is not a late 20th century person. Well, not a tail end of the 20th century, not a 90s person, but like a 70s person, you know. And so I think that we're in a zone. We need leaders, but we need leaders who kind of get it, what's going on. And I don't think our online hosts, our YouTube celebrities, even the ones you might agree with, I don't think they quite have that either. The only person I know who has a serious, you know, kind of cred for leadership these days seems to be someone like Jordan Peterson. You know, I mean, I think that he actually thinks that. That doesn't mean he's perfect. That doesn't mean he hasn't or won't make mistakes. But he at least, I think a lot of people look up to him, you know, and which is much more than you can say about, you know, who do people really look up to these days? That's not like some sort of movie star. And does anyone even look up to movie stars and musicians anymore? Not really. You know, do you really want to base your life on Adele? You know, do you really want to live like oh, I don't know, Brad Pitt, or he's like ancient history. Do you really want to live like Tom Holland, the actor, not the historian? So let's see. Uh, let's see. Nostalgia is poison. I think nostalgia is poison if by nostalgia you mean that kind of sentimental longing for the past. There's a different definition of nostalgia, which can just be kind of remembering the past, and I think there's a good way for that. Will this live stream be available? Well, it'll be on YouTube later. So, and if I'm not too technologically stupid about this, this is only my second or third, I think second live stream. It should be it'll either go up right afterwards, or I will take it back and it'll go up, and I'll edit it and change the sound and boost the color a bit or boost the light a bit. But it'll be up in a few days if I do that. But it all depends on how I end it. Last time I ended it, it didn't seem to want to end. So I ended up doing it and saving it. So keep an eye out. We'll see. But it will be up eventually. Is there such a thing as a meaning crisis on the national level? Trying to put my finger on what seems like a malaise that goes deeper than the COVID lockdowns. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm here in Prague now. Has anyone ever been to Prague? If you have, just put P for Prague on your online. Here's the thing I'm noticing: Prague is one of the most beautiful cities architecturally. I mean, it's just got. I mean, and not just the center where everyone goes, but you go further and further out, and there's still just like these beautiful. They spent a lot of time. Even the Soviets didn't mess it up, and the new modern stuff has kept away from the heart of the city, the ugly modern stuff. So you're walking down the street. What do you see? You see the ugliest tag graffiti, graffiti tags imaginable. Not good street art. I like good street art, but just someone's name, Knickers 95 or whatever, Zebra Kid, or some, and then you see someone come over and spray over that, and then someone else start, and then someone else stop. And here's the thing: these are on beautiful buildings. These are not on like I could understand it because I was there in New York City when they were doing the original the new tag kind of art and the blocky letters and stuff that was based on the art of Von Baudet, who was this weird independent comic artist in the 1970s. And I could see it because there was a sense of the mechanization of society, and so much of this went on the subways in New York City. But I can't see it defacing beautiful buildings. And I was thinking about this today. Why is it? Why? And it's not just here; it's all over. Like in Tbilisi, Georgia, I did something on my Georgian Crossroads channel about this building that was utterly defaced. This beautiful, beautiful building that kids went in there and just totally ruined it. I say kids, they could be in their 20s or 30s or who knows. And I'm sitting there going like, why is this happening? Why is this thing that happened in the South Bronx back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, why is this going all over? Why is it destroying not just, I can see a blank, ugly industrial wall. Yeah, why not? But why is it here in Europe in 2022? And it has to do with the fact that they have no pride in these buildings. They have no pride in their culture. They have no pride in their country. They have no pride in being a European. They have no pride in themselves. And what they're trying to simply do is make a statement of identity. And, Matloba, okay. They have no pride in their lives. They have no sense of their identity is razor thin. And so all they can think to do is to essentially spit at the walls. Because that's what they're doing. They're just using, they're sucking on colored paints to do it, But it really is a spit. It's a like, I hate you. I like me. I hate you. So yeah, I think the meaning crisis has affected whole nations, and in very sad ways, because we're all stuck in this place. Like I said in my cargo video, we're all stuck looking for the cargo. And what's the cargo? The cargo is identity. And we think, if we do it, it will happen. The field of dreams, if we build it, they will come, which has been transferred into, if I paint graffiti, people will know who I am. If I take a selfie, people will know who I am. I will have identity. And if that's where a person's identity is, hey, that's pretty close to having none. Yes, Jocko Willink, great guy. Elon Musk, great guy. I think that these are people. And Elon Musk is getting more and more interesting. And he's young enough that I think we're going to see something happen there, which brings us to huge questions about the divide in America. And he is clearly now not on the side of the woke hydra. He is on the other side of the fence. I don't know what his actual beliefs are. I remember when Babylon Bee interviewed him, and my feeling was these guys were fishing off the pier, and they snagged a marlin, and they somehow got on their show and did an interview with him. And even though they're Christians and I'm Christians, I was just going like, guys, just stop with the stupid, ironic humor, because you're not even that good at it. You're better when you do your Babylon Bee humor stuff than you are just talking. It's just like, confess. Nevertheless, Elon Musk is I don't agree with everything he's done or is doing or says. Nevertheless, he's someone interesting to keep an eye on. What else have we got here? Now, I wouldn't say it's democracy that makes people feel they're smarter. I would say it's other stuff. It's like, for instance, it's the power of positive thinking. It's it's applying equality to the wrong place. And you see, political equality, I think, is important. We should all be equal before the law. That's important. That we all have the right to vote. That's important. That's all democracy stuff. But when you apply equality to, for instance, a human being and saying you must be equal to that other human being, you're in trouble, because there's no way. Each person is of different importance. And some people, there are hierarchies. Elon Musk is a good example. I'm not Elon Musk. I'm nowhere near Elon Musk. When it comes to business, my business sense seems to be rather poor. It's not a crime to admit that. To say that there are people who know something more than you do, or that everyone has their value as an individual. But the problem is when you make them like, two coffee mugs, and they're made by the same people, and you say to yourself, okay, that's what everyone's like. They're like identical coffee mugs, or identical pieces of paper, or identical computers. But we're not. It's not identicality. That's what we're not. We're not identical to each other and of identical worth. Each person is worth something different. And some people forfeit their worth, unfortunately, by essentially, living in a very sad or stupid manner. They still have worth, but they are in the process of forfeiting it as well. We are given that much choice in life that we can waste our abilities. Let's see, what else have we got here? Narcissism, the tyrannical nature of it. Yeah. Well, narcissism, that's one of the whole problems. The narcissism thing is why we're in trouble. Is because, and this is fed by, well, for instance, advertising feeds our narcissism. Rock music, not rock so much, although there was a bit of it there, but pop music after the death of rock music, which we'll put somewhere near the end of the 20th century. Essentially, yeah, and there's still rock music. but it no longer means what it once did. So now you get people, who, I mean, TikTok it's like narcissism central. People get on there and they just have to do something to prove that they're interesting for a few seconds. And that isn't actually interesting. They would be interesting as human beings in reality, but no. The way we live encourages people to think that we are more important than we really ought to think we are. We are important before God. We're tremendously important, but we are we have much more to offer than the just our images of ourselves, and the images of ourselves imitating other people, which is largely what we do through those kinds of forms: Instagram, TikTok, etc. um, Oh yeah, if you recall correctly, there's little or no graffiti seen in your Georgian Crossroads video. Yeah, actually there is. Like I said, I did one on street art and another one on graffiti. And if you go and look those up, trust me, there is graffiti in Tbilisi. So don't agree with everybody being able to vote being important. Why not? You want to have no. I understand what you're saying because everyone can be propagandized, and that's the problem, though. To my way of thinking of a mass society, which we have, is that it is important. I think it is important that we have the ability to vote, but what we need are filters to stop the tyranny of the 51% vote. That if 51% of the people all agree on something doesn't make it right, which is why America is a constitutional republic. And Switzerland is also has checks and balances. And I think the best democratic situations, you have to have a check and balance against just the tyranny of the mob, who can be puffed up by propaganda. And it's so easy. There are people whose jobs it is to simply figure out what makes you tick and how to get your knees jerking. You know, Democracy is smart, trustful, but isn't looking at headlines and articles. Valuing. Yeah, I think so. Uh, yeah, yeah. Well, what's happened is, and I think the computer has opened this door, the online world. It's made democracy much, much more problematic. But we don't have anything better to replace it with. Because certainly the alternatives, king, a lot of people aren't going to vote for you're going to want that, back. Strongman, dictator, that's also a big problem. Authoritarian government, you know, people are reacting to what's going on. Like look at Canada. Canada has become like this benign authoritarian government because everything they do, they say they're doing for everybody. Until the day that some rather peaceful truckers come to Ottawa and are blowing their horns and are actually having a good time in the streets protesting. That's too much for them to bear because they're not doing the usual, what violent protesters or anything do. And so that makes the Canadian officials who have kind of latched on to a serious politically correct format really, really nervous. Well, let me just tell you, I'm going to wrap this up probably around the top of the hour. So you've got about, let's see. Oh, I'm looking. Actually, let's say about 15 minutes after the hour, maybe 20. So if there's any last questions, uh, fire away or thoughts. I'm enjoying this. It's, has, well, in a way, I'm glad it's not like tons of people. I think I've had more people viewing and coming and going than I have actually staying, but that's okay because it means I get to actually interact with you, and that's important. So, any last thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, biting remarks, criticisms? I'll wait. But like I said at the beginning of this, For me, it's very important to react to situations like we see in the world right now by simply saying, okay, we're in a new place. Don't get, don't expect the past to come back. You know, it's just like during 2020, it was clear 2019 wasn't coming back. And in fact, it's been clear it hasn't been coming back and it hasn't been coming back. And we're not going back to quote unquote normal. There is no, that normal is gone. Will we reach some kind of points of equilibrium again? Yeah, I think so. But will they look the same? No. And one way I'm really glad is that this has put a huge check, you know, on a reality check on people. It's like, really, you're going to say that what your pronoun is the most important thing in the world? No, I don't think so. You know, it's just that seems silly in comparison to the possibility of the major powers of the world possibly fighting each other. You know, it just seems like, what are you even thinking about? And I heard I saved this clip. There was a guy on some YouTube channel who was talking about Putin and Russia and what was going on with Ukraine. And this was about 3 or 4 days before the actual invasion. And he's saying things like this, you know, Putin is what does he understand? He's just like, this is just like so wrong. He's talking about like he's just like this bitchy little girl. And he's something like, I mean, Putin, LOL. And the guy is serious. And I'm sitting there going, see, if this is the kind of person making political comments, we're doomed. You know, if he can, what he's doing is he's taking the kind of postmodern ironic bitchiness and applying it to the new world we're moving into. And all I can say is that man is very much a 2019 individual. You know, they are living in a past which is going to be fading very soon, I think. But I do think there are good possibilities in the future. But first, we have to get over this period of tension and see what it really means. And it can go in some very dark directions. So I'd save a few things that you want to keep on off the internet. Make sure you download them. and I'm very serious about that because if a cyber war breaks out, we're going to see something we have never seen before. So, okay. Last call for thoughts. You got 2 minutes. I'm gonna get out of here. So, and I'm in a European room that has got massively tall. Let's see if I can show you this. That's how high up the ceiling is. I kind of love it. And super thick walls. And it's obviously, I think, a building that's at least 300 or 400 years old. And I love stuff like this. So, but there's not much on the walls. It's kind of dead. That's why it's all white behind me. So, okay. Well, I'm going to get out of here. Can you even still hear me? Maybe I shut off a while ago. Okay, I'm going to end this. Thanks for spending some time with me. And I hope, do pray for what's going on in Ukraine if you pray. And don't give in to fear and think practically about what to do in the future. So from Tbilisi, this is Byrne saying, do swim against the stream, and the stream's going to start rushing really hard.